Clerk again to please call the roll.
Trustee Cameron. Here. Carbonaro.
Here.
Daney. Here. Gabrenia.
Here.
Hopkins.
Here.
Ranky.
Present.
President Wallace.
Present. The items this evening fall under Police and Health Committee with Chairman Carbonaro.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are two items under our committee this evening. The first one is traffic calming policy request, and I'll defer that to Deputy Chief.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the police department and village staff this evening in regards to our proposal for a neighborhood traffic calming policy. I believe you all had some materials forward in your board packet relating to that. And basically what it involves and entails is a proposal to enact a neighborhood traffic calming policy. One of the biggest complaints we receive throughout any given year at the police department are traffic-related neighborhood traffic safety concerns of the such. And quite often the response by the residents who are concerned by those matters is, what are we doing about it? Why can't we get a speed bump? Why can't we put up a stop sign? Why can't we lower speed limits, et cetera? I think we all wish it was that easy to fix those matters. However, as we all know, it's a little more complicated than that. So briefly, traffic calming is simply the application of traffic engineering and other physical measures designed to control traffic speeds, address traffic volumes, improve traffic safety, encourage driving behavior appropriate to the environment without creating new traffic problems in the process. So based on a recent experience that was cited in the proposal was, if you'll recall, the north and western neighborhood traffic concerns over the past summer that we had some very vocal residents attend village board meetings to talk about a handful of issues related to what the residents perceived were the problems in their neighborhood. They included stop sign violations right at the intersection of North and Western, speeding autos, increased traffic, increased truck traffic, to name a few. And if you recall, at the time, the village board was very attentive to those residents' needs, going so far as to pay for and have Public Works install the flashing LED stop signs at that intersection. At the time, it seemed like we had, reached a amicable agreement between all parties involved. Everybody felt good about it, but we continued to receive complaints about the high volumes of traffic, things like that. So the police department, in our response to all that, we do our typical things. We take a look at we listen to the residents, we take a look at the problems ourselves, observe, is there a problem? We'll conduct traffic studies with electronic equipment to give us accurate counts, accurate speeds, things of that nature. Then we will also apply other physical measures like our speed trailers or deploy unmanned drone cars to the area to help hopefully alleviate that problem. And then we'll also tackle it from an enforcement standpoint. If you recall the certain situation that I'm talking about at North and Western, we got a lot of positive feedback. We were seen out there quite often. It wasn't an issue where the residents thought we weren't doing enough. It just wasn't fixing the problem. So then momentum gained beyond the stop signs to think about, do we need traffic speed bumps out there or speed tables, whatever you might want to call them. What we ended up doing was having a neighborhood informational and listening meeting with the residents. And at that time, I believe it was 27 residents from that affected area showed up, and we gave them all an opportunity to speak and voice their concerns. And what we found is that each one of them had a separate concern, to be quite honest, and each one of them had a separate resolution to the matter. Some wanted speed bumps, some didn't want speed bumps. Some felt that the police presence in any particular residential neighborhood was too much. There was too much of us being out there, being seen, flashing lights, squad cars, revving their engines to catch up to violators, things of that nature. And that actually wasn't something that had occurred to us might be a problem. We thought we were out there fixing a problem. And so a lot of those things came out of that meeting. And what else came out of that meeting was us to take an inside look at what could we do differently and not repeat this process. Because if all of our internal documents show that the problem started as early as May of 2018 and continued through this meeting of August 2019. So we wanted to, after having that listening session, we wanted to really take a hard look internally at the police department is what could we do differently in the future to allay some of those problems or those fears, because what we also found was what we thought was a great solution with the flashing LEDs was the majority of residents in attendance that evening hated the stop signs. They thought they were in an eyesore and continue to think that. They think that they kind of, for lack of a better word, trash out their neighborhood, things of that nature. So what we thought was a great solution, we had some pushback, and some had even asked at that meeting to have them taken down. So we wanted to take a look at what we could do moving forward to do things differently. And we reached out to other municipalities, and each one of them we conducted surveys of who has speed bumps in their towns. We reached out to other municipalities to get some ideas regarding their traffic calming policies. And so what you kind of see as a proposal was a conglomeration of all those different traffic policies. We kind of plucked the best things that we thought were most applicable to Bartlett and incorporated those in our policy and that proposal. And the best thing that we feel is a part of this process is just that. It's a more cohesive process. It's not meeting after meeting and meeting with small factions of a neighborhood and getting different complaints at different times. This really allows and stimulates the neighbors to have conversations with each other so that they could have a more cohesive approach to dealing with what they perceive the problems to be traffic related in their neighborhood, and that it helped us to focus our efforts as well. It would help to have us focus our efforts as well in one direction instead of several directions, and it would also create a process to where there's different steps, different checks and balances where we would reach out to the Fire Protection District, Public Works. Again, it would be a whole process of checks and balances to where there's not one decision-making body in this, or it's presented to the board for a different recommendation, or before we got to the point where we would install LED stop signs in the future. So hopefully that's a good summation of the materials you have in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns.
Well, I have a comment. I think it's a great idea to have the residents involved, because when this all came about previously, it was my understanding at the time that it was something that the residents wanted. And then when the stop sign didn't seem to work, then I was pushing for what perceived to be the next stage, which would have been the traffic islands or whatever. And then I catch heck from the other residents in letter form, like what a stupid idea and everything, but I thought I was doing them a good service, and yet it came back to in a negative way towards me. So I think it's a great idea to get the residents' involvement. It does slow things down a little bit, but I just still think it's a great idea. The second question is that how do we know that something like the flashing stop sign is actually working? There's no objective way to evaluate that. So do we just keep it there forever? Or do we say, okay, we put this up, but we really don't know that it's made any difference? Because I know the residents don't particularly like that stop sign. And here again, we were putting it in thinking this was something we were doing to correct the problem and to help that community, that neighborhood. And if it's not really working, I mean, if it is and it's slowing down traffic, keep it for however long. But if it's not and the people don't want it, then why do we have it there?
Oh, that's a great point. Statistically, I can't fully answer that question, but I can tell you that the amount of neighborhood complaints that we've gotten since we've taken all these measures and followed through with this listening session have tailed off. I think we've maybe had one since August that I'm aware of. We haven't had the request for extra patrols. We haven't fielded the same complaints in a nutshell. So it's hard to state statistically. Our officers do spot check these things from time to time, and the data that I'm aware of doesn't necessarily support one way or another that the effectiveness of it. So I'm sorry I'm at a loss to.
Well, hitchhiking on what Trustee Cameron said, I live in that area, and I can tell you that over the months that I've had a number of complaints about the flashing stop signs, and yes, they've diminished at this point in time, and I think the only reason they've diminished is because of the fact that people have expressed their concern, and they just feel like nothing else can be done, so they've just learned to live with it. But I think that if there's some way that we could take a look at that, there have been numerous people that have come to me and said, you know, it looks like a carnival ride. They can see this flashing stop sign from Devon Avenue when they turn on Devon from Western, and they think a train's coming through. And the other night, I was turned off Lake Street on the North Avenue, and I didn't realize it, but I could actually see the flashing stop sign once I made the left turn onto North Avenue. So if there is some way, if we could put some value on whether or not, that has helped, maybe we could take a step back and put conventional stop signs in there again.
Jim, does the policy that we're proposing also include the removal of things like that? Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that was actually the point I was going to make in response to that was that, so part of the process would be a petition of which 66% of the impacted area would have to be on board to pursue a traffic calming measure after it's cleared certain hurdles with us. To that same end, so that would give us a majority of residents in that area that would be on board for that, for lack of a better term. But also in that provision is that we would have to give it according to the way it's written, we would give it a 12-month, trial run, so to speak, and then re-examine whether it's effective, whether it's still wanted, or whether it's still warranted.
Yeah, that's a good point, because, as I said, I've had, a number of people that, have come to me and said, we're not happy with it. But again, I don't know if that's just a small minority, or if it's the feeling of the overall neighborhood. I have no way of determining what that is.
Yeah, and also a provision, and that would be, then we would also need a majority of residents to be on board with the removal process as well.
I can see us removing it, and people are going to be calling, saying we want the flashing stop signs back. So.
Well, I think that's the point of putting it in a policy, not only to get something installed, but also to get it removed. Because we're going to be spending money to do these things, right? And so we want to make sure that they're working for a period of time, and then if they want to remove, do another study to see if there's been an impact made before we remove them. And not everybody's always going to be in favor of getting them installed or having them removed, and that's why there's a petition process where they have to have a certain percentage of the neighborhood that either wants to have it installed, or once it's installed, wants to have it removed, and have us look at it from a did we make an impact in whatever type of the complaint was. Specifically to your question about the stop signs, the reason that they went in is we were getting complaint after complaint after complaint about vehicles not stopping for the stop sign. That's after we put out unmanned cars, after we were doing stop sign enforcement there, and we continue to get complaints. So the question was, what else can you do? I think the resident came back to the board and said, we appreciate everything the police department's doing, but it's just not working. So what else is there? So that's where the stop signs came from. And most of that was due to the fact that construction was going on 59, and construction was going on 20, and everybody's GPS devices were routing the quickest way, which was between West Bartlett Road and Lake Street to cut through, and nobody's familiar with the area, right? So they're all making that right-hand turn from Western onto North Avenue, rolling through the stop sign. And that's not acceptable to the residents who have children up there and stuff like that. So that was the final straw. And now I think what we need to do, to your point, is maybe do another traffic study and see if the volumes have decreased, and also take a look at the stop sign and see if we're seeing those violations, because we aren't getting the complaints anymore. So I think that everything that we did worked, coupled with the fact that construction's over, so the volumes are down. And we also worked with Lynn Means, our village traffic consultant, and took a look at the timing of the downtown traffic lights. And they determined that they could make some changes to the timing of the lights, which seems to have improved the flow through downtown as well. Seems like the lights are cycling faster and traffic is moving through downtown more, which I think is eliminating some of that cut-through traffic as well. So I think we could take a look at that, and if it makes sense to remove them, then we can work with Public Works to do that.
Just one other question I have. Is the 66%, is that arbitrary, or did you guys come up with that through some other organization, or how did you come up with that number as far as being a majority number?
Again, with it kind of being a two-thirds majority number was part of the thought process, but in looking at least half a dozen other traffic calming policies, that seemed to be the kind of the industry-wide standard.
Okay. Just was curious.
In these other traffic calming policies from other departments, how many actually have obtained the 66%?
Actually, I don't have that statistic itself.
Just to me, looking at it, 66% of the households, that is a pretty high number.
Quite high.
So I just would like to know that statistic.
It's 66% in their defined area, though.
What would happen theoretically is we would define the impact area, but,
You're right, it could be a big number, but it's small enough. I think it's a good idea. I think that way we don't, I think the one thing that we've learned from the last episode that we had was trying to fix stuff, kind of getting the cart before the horse and trying to fix stuff, and then it makes some people mad and other people not mad. So a more defined way to correct any issues that come up, and there's actually framework around it, and we can fix it, test it, remove it if necessary. It's not working, so.
I think what it does is it helps you all too, sitting at the dais, when people come in during the public comment portion and say, we want something done. And you could say, look, we have a common process that everyone follows, and this is what it is. And I think that should help. And if the 66% turns out to be an issue, we can always adjust that too. If we're finding that it's just too hard for people to get 66% of the defined area to sign a petition, we can revisit that. But like Jim said, that's just based off of the standard that we saw from reviewing other municipalities' policies.
Could we bring this back to another committee meeting instead of bringing this to the board to let the residents actually feel the impact and actually take this in before? I'd like to get some.
It might be a good idea to run this past the people that were involved in that North Avenue one and just say, hey, do you think that this would have mitigated the problem better than we did? That's a pretty good idea. And
Some residential input.
yeah, and one of the things that I can already see being an issue with the number 66%, whatever it is they're going to say, I'm signing this, and what's going to happen, right? What exactly is going to happen? Because you're signing it at the beginning. So there has to be like an array of things, like this is probably what you're going to see, because a lot of people aren't going to sign it until they really would know like what's going to happen there. So am I going to have speed bumps? Am I going to have this or that? So let's make sure that we organize it to the point where we've investigated some of it and say, this is what we predict will happen. Do you want to sign a petition? 'Cause you can educate the point person, right? And then they have to be clear when they're educating the other people what steps we will be taking. So they don't come back to us and say, well, you didn't tell me that was going to happen.
But is the petition making a statement that they see a concern, or a
concern,
petition
yeah.
requesting that you make changes without them knowing what the changes are? Those are two different things.
So realistically, the petition wouldn't be at the start of the process. We wouldn't
Be the complaint.
change what we do in-house first leading up to that point. We would still continue to go through all of our in-house means of helping that resident with their concern. This would be something that after we took a look at it, and we're still not getting the desired result, we're still not getting the residents' desired result, this would be, an escalation to the next thing after we've already done anything. So we're not looking to change anything internally as far as how we handle traffic complaints. This may be a one-time in a year kind of thing, once we've spent that time educating people. That's a big component of what we do, because a lot of people just want the speed limit lowered or things like that, and then we take the time to educate them to the industry standards, the MUCTD standards that govern that, the Illinois Vehicle Code, what have you. So it really won't change what we do in the way we address traffic complaints or safety concerns. This will just kind of be an escalation of those things when we've kind of reached an impasse, so to speak, with, you know.
Good. Okay, so yeah, I think maybe we do a little bit more with the residents that are involved, and then bring it back to another committee, and we'll shoot it to board. Is everybody good with that?
Fine.
All right.
So we'll just move this to a different date?
Yep, they'll bring it back again and say, we talked to some of the people that were involved in this last one, this is what they think about the proposed policy, and we tweaked this, or we didn't tweak anything, and we just need to move it to board after that.
Okay, so we'll move on. The second item.
Thank you, Deputy Chief.
Thank you, Chief. The second item on our agenda for tonight is the prohibiting of the use of tobacco products and alternative nicotine products on village-owned park properties. And who do we have on this, Christie? Christie's not here.
Yeah, we were going to turn it over to Brian.
So we have
Start the 3-minute timer.
a no smoking in enclosed buildings ordinance that we recently passed. And Trustee Hopkins asked that we also look at public property, and that becomes problematic because that includes roads and rights-of-way and detention ponds, and we talked about it, including it just in village parks. So we kind of look for what those parks are, and basically, there's a couple we leased that this wouldn't apply to, but we have the Town Center Fountain Park, Kohler Fields, Bartlett Park, the Veterans Memorial Park, and Rosica Park. And I think it's really all those are either a public gathering space or recreational fields. And the idea is, you know, there's kids around in those areas often, is that we would also prohibit it outdoors. And that's essentially what this ordinance does, is it prohibits smoking or vaping on that property. And because not everyone knows what parks we own, they're actually listed, you know, by name, by legal description, and it would require signage as well, so people know that, you know, they're not supposed to smoke or vape in those public parks. So that's essentially it. Did I meet your time limit?
You did.
I have two questions regarding this. Is it even feasible to say that we can enforce this, Chief? I mean, do we have the personnel to go around driving from park to park? And
I would say this is something we're not going to go out and actively enforce unless we get a complaint about it, and then we would address it that way.
okay. Number two, do we actually, since we own the park, do we actually run the softball tournaments that appear at these Kohler Field? No?
The Park District does all the programming for the parks.
Okay, so you got a bunch of college guys that are playing softball leagues during the summer. After the game, they want to have a beer and maybe a cigar, and they can't do that. So they'll probably go someplace else now? Is that what they're going to do? It might be a loss of revenue for us. Something to think about.
Where are they going to have a beer?
Kohler Field.
Is that legal, Chief?
I don't believe, I have to take a look at the ordinance, but I don't think it is.
I think smoking and vaping around children is not appropriate at all. So I strongly agree with this ordinance.
I just don't know how you're going to enforce it.
It's not a question of enforcing it. If someone sees a no smoking and vaping sign, you would take it for face value that they're going to say, you know what, maybe this isn't the best place to smoke or vape. and not do it in front of children.
It also gives another parent the authority, not authority, the backing to say that this isn't appropriate as deemed by our village board. There's the sign, please stop.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that there's any amount of revenue, to your point, that would make me change my mind as to allow one softball field to be drinking and smoking cigars next to a 5-year-old playing t-ball on the field next door.
if they're out between 7 and 10, I mean, these are college kids that are playing tournaments later at night.
And there, I don't know if you know any baseball parents or baseball families, they play till 10 o'clock at night, even in the little leagues. There's no amount of money that's worth that, in my opinion.
Okay.
So we'll forward this on to the village board for a vote?
Sure.
And that's all we have for this evening.
All righty then. Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Daney, seconded by trustee Cameron. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Camer,
Yes.
Carbonaro,
Yes.
Daney,
Yes.
Cabrera,
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Ranky.
Yes. We are adjourned.